Simon Spear is an ordinary teenager. He has loving parents and a younger sister Nora, who is passionate about cooking. In school, Simon has faithful friends with whom he spends a lot of fun time. Currently, Simon is attending high school and preparing for graduation. At first glance, Simon doesn't stand out among his peers, but he harbors a big secret: his non-conventional orientation. Of course, Simon's parents don't know about it. He is very afraid of being misunderstood by society. In the kitchen, Nora conducted another culinary experiment. Without having a proper breakfast, Simon headed to school. Seeing a guy from the neighborhood, Simon tried to flirt with him, but it was an unsuccessful attempt. After picking up his friends, Nick and Leah, Simon stopped at a coffee shop as everyone asked. Then they picked up Abby, whom Nick secretly has a crush on, but she doesn't notice. School life goes on as usual. While Simon and Abby were standing at their lockers, Martin, an odd-looking guy, approached them. Neither Simon nor Abby takes him seriously. In the evening, the Spear family planned to watch a movie. When the topic of people with non-conventional orientations came up, Simon felt embarrassed but tried not to show it. Later, Jack showed his son the gift he had prepared for his wife Emily for their 20th wedding anniversary. Simon honestly said that the presentation with family photos seemed too ordinary, as if it were made by a fourth grader, and suggested some improvements. In the evening, Leah called Simon and told him about a post regarding a guy with a non-conventional orientation from their school. The post was anonymous, and Leah was curious about who it could be about. Simon got nervous and ended the conversation under a flimsy excuse. After reading the post, Simon recognized his own feelings in those words and decided to respond to this guy using a fictional nickname. Simon couldn't believe he had dared to do it, but there was no turning back now. In his message, Simon talked about his family, friends, and himself. For the first time in his life, Simon told someone his biggest secret, as he couldn't truly be sincere with anyone close to him. Checking his account in the morning, Simon was disappointed to see no new messages. He was so nervous at school that he couldn't focus on anything. The guy kept checking his account, but there were no new messages each time. During lunch break in the school cafeteria, Simon hardly spoke to his friends, anticipating a response from the unknown user under the nickname Blue. Seeing Simon constantly distracted by his phone, the vice principal took it away from the guy until the end of the rehearsal. Simon is participating in a school theatrical production. He is eagerly awaiting the end of the rehearsal to finally get his phone back. As promised, after the rehearsal, the vice principal returned the phone to him. Mr. Worth thinks he and Simon are alike, so he decides to keep an eye on him. In the car, Simon immediately checked his messages and saw a new one. At that moment, he was so excited that he could barely breathe. Blue asked Simon if he had told anyone about his orientation. From that moment on, Simon engaged in active correspondence with Blue. In Simon's school, there is a guy named Ethan who doesn't hide his orientation, but Simon wouldn't have the courage to do the same. The first signs of his non-conventional orientation appeared many years ago when he dreamt about Daniel Radcliffe every night for a whole month. For a while, Simon even had a girlfriend, but she didn't really attract him. Now every morning, Simon checks his phone first thing. Corresponding with Blue became a breath of fresh air for him. This is the only person with whom he could be truly sincere. Walking through the school corridor, Simon looks at the teenagers around him and wonders who Blue could be, a fan of Game of Thrones and especially Jon Snow. Otherwise, Simon's school days went on as usual. Mr. Worth noticed that lately the guy has been literally glowing. What could he be so happy about? Simon accidentally didn't log out of his account on the library computer, so Martin was able to read all his correspondence with Blue. While Simon remains unaware, his secret is on the verge of becoming common knowledge throughout the school. Bram, the most popular guy in school, invited everyone to his house for a Halloween party. Since Bram, like Blue, loves Oreo cookies, Simon suspects they might be the same person. During another rehearsal, when Simon went to buy soda, Martin followed him and hinted that he knows his secret. Moreover, Martin took a photo of the correspondence. Simon took Martin to the library for a serious conversation. Martin said he would delete the photos if Simon would get him a date with Abby. Otherwise, everyone would see this correspondence. Simon can't believe he's being blackmailed. Martin gave him time to think. At dinner at home, Simon couldn't think of anything else but this situation. Nevertheless, he keeps texting Blue, who still hasn't revealed his identity. Anonymity gives him a sense of security. But Simon's security is now in question, so he has no choice but to help Martin impress Abby. Martin brought Simon into his house to his room, where the place was a mess. So far, Martin has no chance with Abby because he's behaving like a clown. Simon advised Martin to change his wardrobe first, but Martin didn't like that idea. He wants Abby to like him for who he is. Simon decided to invite Martin to Bram's party. Perhaps this will be a chance for him to get to know Abby better. Party time arrived, and the friends dressed up. Abby looked stunning. Nick flirted with her, but she saw him as just a friend. Everyone was surprised when they found out Simon invited Martin. Seeing his costume, Simon realized it was a disaster. Nevertheless, they all headed to Bram's house together. Abby and Nick chatted pleasantly, while Martin tried to intervene in their conversation. Undoubtedly, he was annoyed that Nick was flirting with Abby. Simon hinted to Martin that in this costume he looked ridiculous. The party at Bram's was in full swing. Simon was going to have his first drink ever. Nick couldn't take his eyes off Abby, telling Simon how beautiful she was. This complicates things for Simon because he has to make Martin appealing to Abby. When Nick said he was going to ask Abby out, Simon lied that she's dating someone older named Jonathan who's in college. Hearing this, Nick was deeply upset. When Bram suggested a game that required 4 people, Simon invited Martin and Abby to join. The loser had to drink a shot of alcohol. So the company got drunk, and everyone felt more uninhibited. Nick even fell asleep. In the bathroom, drunken Simon rehearsed his speech in front of the mirror, convinced that Bram was blue. Perhaps something could have worked out between them. However, seeing Bram with some girl, Simon realized he was mistaken. Martin got so drunk that he vomited on Simon. This completely ruined his evening. After the party, Leah escorted Simon, who couldn't walk straight, home. Since Simon's parents were still awake, the teenagers planned to sneak into his room unnoticed. But of course Emily and Jack noticed them. They didn't scold their son because he hadn't driven and had come home on time. Leah stayed overnight at the Spears house. She and Simon are close friends. Leah shared that she often feels invisible. Today at the party, she felt sidelined while Simon and the others were having fun. When she admitted there's a guy she's madly in love with, Simon quickly changed the subject. Waiting for Leah to fall asleep, Simon opened his laptop and wrote a long message to Blue, telling him all his worries. Simon feels it's unfair that people with non-conventional orientations often don't find understanding in society. Simon thinks that when he goes to college, everything will change, and he'll be proud of his orientation. Perhaps that's what freedom is. At school, everyone is preparing for the upcoming Christmas and discussing how and where they will spend it. Martin pretended to cut his finger and asked Simon to show him where the band-aids were. In reality, it was just an excuse to talk privately. Martin threatened Simon that if things didn't move forward, he would be forced to leak the correspondence. Simon fears that in that case, Blue would get scared and stop responding to him. This prompted Simon to act, and he suggested that Abby rehearse the lines for the play with him and Martin additionally. She happily agreed. Simon truly values Blue and is afraid to lose him. The teenagers gathered at a cafe. Their table was served by a cute guy named Lyle. He recognized Simon because they both attend Latin classes together. It seems there was an immediate mutual liking between them. Martin asked Abby many questions about her family and herself. The girl shared that her father left them many years ago. Martin told Abby that she deserves the best father. She was pleased to hear such warm words. Martin, who didn't want to miss his chance, continued to compliment her, making Abby blush. While they chatted nicely, Simon approached Lyle and started a conversation with him. Lyle laughed at his jokes, but unfortunately he had to get back to work. Simon is almost certain that Lyle is Blue. Perhaps it's fate. Blue wrote to Simon that he wants to tell the father about his orientation today, and let it be what it was. Simon supported him in this decision. When Simon drove Abby home, she said that Martin turned out to be not at all like she thought. In fact, he's sweet and kind. Martin was the first person Abby sincerely told about her feelings regarding the parents' divorce. Before, she tried to seem like a cheerful girl who was happy to transfer to a new school, but it was just a mask. Suddenly, Simon confessed to Abby about his non-conventional orientation. He could no longer keep it to himself and wanted to speak out. Abby promised to keep the secret, but she wasn't very surprised. At home, Simon, gathering his courage, asked Blue to reveal his identity. Simon realizes that he's fallen in love. The next morning, Blue replied to the message. It turned out he had told the father about his orientation, and everything went not as bad as he thought. However, Blue still wasn't ready to reveal his identity to Simon. From now on, Abby and Martin became very close, which Nick didn't like. Simon pretended not to be involved. When Nick was about to confess his feelings to Abby, Simon had to lie to his friend that Leah was in love with him and suffering a lot. According to Simon, Nick is not going to get anywhere with Abby, but Leah would be a perfect match for him. After school, Leah shared that Nick asked her out. Simon advised her to accept, although Leah clearly had doubts. It seems that all this big lie Simon has gotten away with. Abby, who now knows his secret, freely talks to him about guys. Simon isn't used to it yet, so he feels awkward. Seeing Lyle, Simon noticed that the guy was also looking at him. Lyle approached Simon and started a conversation. However, all of Simon's hopes were shattered when Lyle asked if Abby had a boyfriend. Simon was walking away deeply disappointed. Martin wanted to ask him for advice about Abby again, but Simon just waved him off, advising to confess his feelings openly. Before the match began, everyone sat down in the stands. Simon asked Leah and Nick how their date went. By their looks, it was clear that it didn't go very well. Martin went to the center of the soccer field and proposed to Abby in front of everyone to be his girlfriend. However, Abby turned him down because she only loves Martin as a friend. Everyone started laughing at Martin. Nick was puzzled because Simon had previously told him that Abby was in love with Martin. He just shrugged. Now his reputation is at stake. Martin was filmed and was leaked online. Now he has become the subject of ridicule. Simon wants to apologize to Martin, but he won't pick up the phone. Blue wrote to Simon saying that he was going with his father to the lake for the Christmas weekend where there would be no internet connection. With just one phrase from the message, Simon understood who Blue really was. It was a guy from his school, Cal. The Spears celebrated Christmas at home. Simon kept thinking about Cal, imagining how they would be together. The evening was ruined by a call from Leah, who urgently asked Simon to come to the computer. It turned out that Martin leaked Simon's correspondence with Blue to the school website, hoping that everyone would forget his own embarrassment at the stadium. Even Nora, Simon's sister, had already seen this post, which means that soon their parents would find out about it. But now it doesn't matter anymore. The first thing Simon did was to write a message to Blue, telling him what happened. Simon just hopes that Blue won't disappear after this. The friends call and text Simon, but he ignores them. Right now he doesn't want to see anyone. In the morning, it was time to open Christmas presents, but nothing made Simon happy anymore. At that moment, he gathered the courage to talk to his parents, thinking that it would be better if they heard the truth from him. Simon just doesn't want the family to think badly of him. His parents took it with understanding. There were still no messages from Blue. Simon decided to change his style of clothing to match his orientation. He still avoids meeting the friends, but this couldn't go on forever. However, the friends were not concerned about Simon's orientation. They were only concerned that he dragged them into his web of lies. They trusted him, but he betrayed their trust, and now they don't want anything to do with him. The most painful thing was for Leah, who had been in love with Simon all this time, but he always saw her only as a friend. When Simon arranged a date for her with Nick, she realized that it was over. Leah is ready to accept Simon's orientation, but not the fact that he is manipulative and a liar. So Simon lost all his friends. No one talks to him at school anymore, and Mr. Worth no longer thinks they are alike. Because Martin leaked the correspondence, Cal now knows who he's been communicating with all this time. If of course it really was Cal. At school, Simon became the subject of mockery. Deep down Leah felt sorry for him. There's another guy with non-standard orientation, Ethan. Simon didn't talk to him before because he thought they had little in common. Ethan never hid his orientation, but that doesn't mean it was easy for him. After a preventive talk with the school principal, Simon was going home in upset feelings. Martin already regrets what he's done, but Simon doesn't care. Martin took away his right to choose, and now they have nothing to talk about. At home, Simon read a message from Blue, who now knows who he is. Blue wants to stop communicating with Simon and deleted his account. In despair, Simon burst into tears. Now he's completely alone against the whole world. Is there nothing that can be done? Gathering courage, at school Simon approached Cal and asked if he was Blue. However, Cal didn't understand what was being talked about. Emily worries about her son, who has become very withdrawn. She always suspected that Simon had a secret, but she didn't know what exactly. Simon became an outcast, but for the first time in a long time he can be himself, and his mother understands that. Together they will overcome everything. Seeing Leah walking her dog, Simon approached her to talk. Simon confessed that he fell in love with the person he was messaging with, so he did everything to prevent Martin from outing them. This would scare off that guy. That's Simon's main motive for lying. Leah was ready to forgive Simon and asked him to tell her about that guy. Jack decided to have a serious talk with his son and asked him when he started having this. Simon replied that it had started about 4 years ago. Jack feels guilty for overlooking it. Simon told the father that it's not his fault. They hugged each other in tears. Jack showed the family a video he prepared to celebrate the 20th wedding anniversary. It was a very touching moment. Simon decided to post on the school website, telling his true story. Simon regrets hurting the friends in his efforts to keep his secret, but Simon is tired of being afraid. Now he wants to apologize to the friends, as well as confess his sincere feelings to Blue, whom he doesn't even know in person. There was the school play. The audience applauded. By the way, Nick and Abby are now dating. In the dressing room, all the friends approached Simon and asked if he wanted company. That's how they made up. It seems like life is getting back on track. Simon is happy that he can now be himself. But Simon wasn't the only one who realized his wrong. Martin asked him for forgiveness in front of everyone. Simon finally waited for Blue. It turned out to be Bram. At that party, he was with some girl because he was heavily drunk. Simon is very happy with this turn of events. There are 17 days left until graduation. Now, thanks to Simon's example, many teenagers have started openly talking about their feelings. By finding harmony with himself, Simon found harmony in his family and in life in general.